This nibble originally aired on RSBANDB Update, episode 808 and a half. Enjoy. All right, question from Thieves, and this is something that he says just popped into his head and set off his theory sensors, and he wants our thoughts on it. He says, in August, we got the portable workbench, treasure hunter item. In October, we got the Artificer's measure, which is untrainable and requires 99 crafting and 102 archaeology. And some of the ingredients for this item require prif, therefore it's about a minimum of 75 construction to create this item too. And in November, we got construction contracts with the new construction outfit in the plank box. Now, if a player were to complete the estate agent's store, they would accrue about 5 million XP. This month, we also got a new yak track that awards extra construction XP throughout its duration, as well as archaeology and herb lore. This isn't outside the norm of a yak track, but it's just interesting that construction has been included this time. Before herb lore and farming were boosted to 120, there was a news post that stated we will be increasing more skills to 120, and we are currently working on 2 skills in particular, which turned out to be farming and herb lore. We will be making 120s full with worthwhile stuff to unlock, and we want to reassure you that we won't be releasing 120s at an accelerated pace. Now, surprisingly, the last few months have been fairly construction-heavy, notably with the Artificer's measure and the outfit tailored for extremely high-level players. Construction sits at 24 out of the 28 skills that players have maxed in due to the fact it's expensive, boring, intensive, and sadly, useless. So here's the question. The construction updates I've listed tackle some of the problems I mentioned above. Contracts in the Artificer's measure made it less expensive. The outfit, portable, and plank box have made it less intensive, and the skill sadly remains boring and useless. However, have we already seen the construction rework, or are Jagex giving us some early tools and boosts in preparation for 120 construction, or rework like I suspect? I would appreciate the feedback.
Who wants to do it? Anyone else got a pen?
I thought you did.
I do.
Okay, go for it.
Well, sadly, I think the answer is like no and no and no. I don't think this is enough. And I don't think they're doing it. I don't think it's in the near future. And I would hope that they would have the foresight to not push this to 120 without having a legitimate rework. Because Thieves makes a great point with the uselessness of the skill. And that pains me because I love it. It's one of my favorite skills, but it doesn't have the same use that it once did. And that has to be addressed before you can push it out to 120.
Well, you could push it out to 120 and address the usefulness all in one shot.
With the rework?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm of 2 opinions on this. I don't think if the term construction rework is to imply player-owned house rework, I don't think we'll see that in 2021. Could we potentially, at the tail end of 21, see a 120 construction that isn't tied to the POH? I think it's a possibility. But I wouldn't count on a POH rework, because before archaeology, the construction skill with the POH was the biggest update that they ever put out. And back then, it took them 18 months back in 2006 with a 2006 development budget and cycle. Now extrapolate that out to 2020, and you can see how long it would take something like that. And let alone, I think there'd be huge challenges with redoing the POH.
But anything less than a redone POH is not going to, the player base is just not going to accept that as a construction rework. It's the same thing as when you think of the bank rework, right? What did I say all along? What was the symbol of that?
Placeholders.
And it's the same thing with construction. If you don't touch the POH, people will not consider it a rework.
All right, now I'm waiting for Sirion to tell us why we're wrong.
I know, right? Me too.
Oh, no, actually not today. I'm actually sort of on Tannis' side here. I think, the usefulness of the skill just needs to be addressed. And I think the easiest way is to do that is to take construction outside of the player-owned houses, like we got with the contracts, but build actual good content there, and then tie that into a 120. I don't really have anything sophisticated this time for you guys.
Right, and with that, you still have the problem that the POH is left behind.
Yeah, it sounds like one of those things that, yeah, like you need to rebuild it from scratch to get any use out of it. Like you're sort of stuck with the spaghetti there. And
in 2006 there were bugs with it.
The question, I think, this might be a question for you guys. Like, what do you think? If they're going to put all this effort into basically rebuilding player-owned houses from scratch, right? That's a lot of work.
It's basically redoing the skill.
It's basically redoing the skill. Would you rather have that or something completely else, completely new? How attached are we actually to player-owned houses?
Something else.
See, I would rather have the house, but I mean, you gotta think every MMO out there has a house kind of building construction.
Stowe doesn't.
Thing. Stowe doesn't?
No.
Well,
I mean, there's the Fleet Starbase, but that's like a clan project, right?
Right. But like you have houses in ESO, Fallout, like I mean all that. Even I think
there's also the argument to be made that old school has POH changes that people want.
Yeah.
In particular, they have those hidey hole kind of things. They also have the greenhouse, which we didn't get. And no, we're not going to, talk about that. But
what do we get instead, Shay?
The aquarium.
Super useful, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. It still hurts, don't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I don't know. I honestly think that if you're going to rework construction, you just got to do a quality of life pass to the POH beforehand, and then come in with 120 with a new training method in particular. Something that reinvents it in the way that archaeology was from the ground up whole base game design, or the way that mining and smithing was.
Yeah, it needs to be that level, and I mean, and that ends up being the decision. Do you tie up the resources for that?
You also have to remember that when the POH and construction came out, it was the money sink skill. So you have to think, do you want 99 to 120 with the new methods to also be a money sink?
Why is all the money sink on the skilling side? Come
No.
on. Now. No, I know.
Death's
I know.
office.
We did the death cost, I know. But, yeah.
I don't know. It's a hard question. Sirion, which one would you want? You asked that question. Which would you rather have, the POH or something else?
I'm not too attached to the very idea of the POH in itself. I just want it to be useful, and if we can't make it useful with a POH, then it needs to be replaced with something else. Like, I think we had this discussion for agility. Like,
Yep.
Little teaser here in what we discussed on that on that bit, where we talked about shortcuts, right?
Yeah.
That they don't make sense in agility, and I'm not too attached to keeping them in agility. So let's make a different system for that, and come up with something else to make agility useful. I think it's important to keep the identity of a skill. Like, you could argue that the POH and designing your own house and place could be considered the identity of the skill. But it's building your own house is almost sort of a side gig.
Yeah, it feels kind of boring in 2020. Whereas I think the reason everybody liked it in 2006 was because we didn't have any player gathering spots back then, and this was something that had been promised since Classic.
Well,
Yeah,
and it
exactly.
was also like a place I would have liked to seen it as a player like skilling place where you could do these different things, and we have that with the altar, and I guess the armor stand is still useful, but I think we could have really went down that road and made the house just a convenient kind of thing that I don't know. I when things are like OP, I want it to be on the player side, not like necessarily a location side. So like think about it, if you could have had some rooms or some functionality in the POH that would have, that you find in Prif, but wouldn't have necessarily had to be there because we would have already had access to it at a house. You could have toned that down, and I think everyone would have been a little happy about that.
Yeah. And, I think just to wrap this up, we can answer the last bit of Thieves' question. Have we already seen the construction rework? No, I don't think so. And I think what has been detailed that's come out over the last few months is just common sense quality of life changes that you need to make to most of the skills in the game. And, there might have been a different area where we could have called that a rework, but I think our perspective after mining and smithing and even after archaeology has changed as to what RuneScape is capable of. And I think that's why we haven't seen the rework yet. Yeah. And I think that's a perfect.
And they don't want to touch construction, dude. They don't.
No, they don't.
Like we do, they don't.
Yeah, and I mean, you just have to go back to remember the era of when this was built and how long it took to build. In that, in 2006, it took 18 months to build a skill, and it was the most complex thing at the entire time. And there's a reason it hasn't been touched since then. It's because the amount of investment that would be required to go in to re-engineer the way the POH works, to bring it up to modern standards, like you said, Sirion, is probably worth it to put something else out instead.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think if you're going to do it, you got to rip it out and start over.
Yeah, it's like one of those home makeover shows. You're not just changing a room here and there. You're completely gutting the house and starting fresh from the frame. You can find full episodes of RSBANDB Update right here on this YouTube channel. If you found this video useful or just enjoyed it, like and subscribe or leave a comment.